Yesterday was one of the craziest days in the history of college football. It was officially the start of a brand new chapter in the sport. UCLA and USC both decided to leave the Pac-12 and head for the Big Ten. This sent major shockwaves through the college football world. I'm not sure what'll happen next, but if I were to guess, this is only the beginning. So, with college football on the verge of historical realignment, it got me thinking, what the hell does this mean for the Pac-12? Before we get to today's video, make sure to smash that subscribe button and turn on those notifications if you're new to my channel. If you're watching this video, odds are that you love college football, and odds are you aren't subscribed to my channel. So make sure to subscribe to one of the best college football communities here on YouTube. Also, make sure to drop a like on this video as well. It helps out with that YouTube algorithm and helps share the video with more college football fans. Plus, it only takes a second to do. As of right now, there are only 10 teams remaining in the conference entering the 2024 season, making it the Pac-10 once again. With that being said, I think there's a near 0% chance that we get to the 2024 season and all 10 teams are still part of the future conference. I think in the coming weeks or coming months, we'll learn the teams will be leaving the Pac-12. So what exactly will happen? I have no idea, but in this video, I'll be going over what I think potentially could happen for the 10 remaining teams and what potential teams we could see join the conference. We'll start with the obvious one with Oregon. They're clearly the best team left in the conference. They could very well stay and rule the Pac-12 for as long as they'd like, but let's be real here. Oregon is a brand. No way they're going to want to just stay behind. So what conference makes the most sense? Well, if USC and UCLA are going to the Big Ten, you'd have to imagine they'd want to join them. It adds another team out on the West Coast, and a pretty damn good one in Oregon. I think the Ducks would actually be a nice addition to the SEC, but I highly doubt that they'd want just one team out west. Or maybe they could potentially add a second team in Washington to the mix. I think wherever Oregon goes, Washington will likely follow as well. I know the Huskies aren't as enticing as the Ducks, but with how close they are to Oregon, this makes perfect sense for the two teams to go as a package deal. Like I mentioned, I think the Big Ten makes more sense as they'd be adding two more West Coast teams, but maybe the SEC is sitting there and they see the move that happened yesterday and they want to expand out west as well. I mean, getting SEC football out on the West Coast wouldn't be an awful thing. Plus, can you imagine Oregon in the SEC as well? That would be pretty juicy. My final guess is that both schools end up in the Big Ten, but I wouldn't rule out the SEC entirely. Next, we'll head to the Arizona schools, and this one seems pretty obvious. I think we could see both Arizona State and Arizona leave for the Big 12. When looking at the map of how the Big 12 is going to look in 2023, adding both Arizona schools makes a lot of sense, from a travel perspective and a competitive perspective. I do think there's a chance we could see both Arizona schools remain in the Pac-12, especially if they commit to forming a competitive conference, but it looks like the Big 12 just makes too much sense. According to Brett McMurphy of the Action Network, he reported yesterday that the Big 12 could look to add both Arizona schools, along with a few others that we'll mention next. If they were to add 4 teams, that would give them 16, giving them the same amount as the SEC and the Big 10. Speaking of other teams that could head to the Big 12, bring on Colorado and Utah. When looking at the map again, this also makes some sense as well. Plus, you're adding a really good team in Utah. Colorado obviously has experience in the Big 12 as they were originally in the conference when it was known as the Big 7 back in 1948. They remained in the conference all the way up until 2010. Just like with what I mentioned with the Arizona schools, I think this is the only conference that would make sense for both Utah and Colorado to join. Again, assuming they decide to leave the Pac-12. I think the only way we see any of these 4 teams actually move to the Big 12 is if all 4 decide together that they're going to move, which is what the report mentioned earlier. Alright, so just like that, the Pac-12 has been shrunk down to only 4 teams. So, who is exactly left? Well, we have Washington State, Oregon State, Stanford, and Cal. Sadly, I have no idea what we can expect from those teams. Maybe they get an invite from another conference, but it's up to see how they get it anywhere else. So for the sake of this video, let's say they're not wanted and those 4 teams remain in the Pac-12. Well, assuming the Pac-12 sticks around, who would join them? Some obvious teams would include Boise State and San Diego State. Well, that puts them at 6 now. Essentially, this would turn into the new Mountain West with a few other teams coming in. I would add Colorado State, UNLV, Nevada, Hawaii, and Utah State. So that allows room for one more team. And you know what? Why not just add North Dakota State to the conference, assuming they somehow don't get to join another conference because they're wanted. It adds a competitive team to the Pac-12 and you add some geography in there. So there you go. This is how the brand new Pac-12 could look 5 years from now. Again, this is all just hypothetical scenarios, assuming everyone wants out of the conference. Now, there is the scenario that somehow, some way, I don't know how this can even happen, but everyone opts to stay in the Pac-12 and they just decide to add a few more teams. Personally, as a Pac-12 fan, that would be fantastic. So, who could they add? Well, instantly, it makes the most sense if they were to add Boise State and San Diego State. Those two schools have been rumored to join the Pac-12 for some time, so it just makes the most sense. That puts the conference back at 12. If they wanted to expand a little more, I could see them adding Colorado State due to their insanely nice stadium, plus picking one of either Utah State or Nevada. Like I mentioned earlier, there could be a lot of discussions currently going on that we just don't know about. I know that there were reports that came out that said some teams in the Pac-12 weren't having any discussions in regards to moving conferences, but none of us expected UCLA or USC to pull this off, and who knows just how long these conversations were going on. And who knows, maybe teams like Oregon, Washington, Arizona State, they had no intentions of this, but after seeing the news with USC and UCLA, all of a sudden now, they're going to begin having conversations with other conferences as well. It's tough to see a lot of change happening before the 2024 season in regards to the Pac-12, with the exception of the two LA schools. But, like I said, as more discussions take place, I wouldn't be shocked if 2025 or 2026 rolls around and that's the year that these teams opt to switch conferences. And it's not only Pac-12 teams that I'm assuming are having these conversations. I'm assuming there's teams that are currently in the ACC, teams that are currently in the Big 12, even teams that are currently in the Big 10 that might consider switching conferences at some point. I talked about it in yesterday's video, but this is truly only the beginning. Like, no, seriously, this is probably the first page of the first chapter for the craziness that's going to happen in college football over the next decade or so. We might know the future of the Pac-12 next week, or it could be years before we see anything else happen. Like I mentioned earlier, I think we could still see a bunch of teams leave. Which conferences they leave for remains to be seen, but it's just tough to see the Pac-12 remaining intact. I sure hope it does, as I really don't want to see these two power conferences form. I love the history of college football. I love conferences. I love rivalries. Even though Arizona State doesn't have a chance of winning a title, it doesn't stop me from loving the sport every year. The direction college football is currently going towards may change my opinion though over the next few years. So what do you think is going to happen with the Pac-12? Do you think it's going to remain intact and they just add a few teams, or do you think it's going to fold entirely and the Pac-12 will essentially become a group of 5 conference? Whatever your thoughts are on the entire situation, let me know in the comment section down below. I had a great time interacting with everyone in the comments yesterday, and I look forward to interacting with all of you again today. Before you guys leave, make sure to smash that subscribe button and turn on those notifications if you're new to my channel. If you love college football, then this is definitely the place for you. Also, make sure to drop a like on this video as well. It helps out with that confusing YouTube algorithm and helps share the video with more college football fans. Plus, it only takes a second to do. As always, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you all in my next video.